So we're coming now to the end of this workshop. For me personally, my impression is that we have all learned a lot, and we as the co-chairs in particular, that this was really a rich debate on the opportunities, also on the hurdles. But we have had the opportunity this morning to discuss in particular partnership, which is very an important factor of the establishment of any production capability, and especially if you want to have it sustainable. And certainly one type of stakeholder on its own cannot make it or cannot make it sustainably, and therefore we need to be together and to work together on this. Countries of the north and of the south, the manufacturers, current manufacturers, would-be manufacturers, funders, regulators, and really the value, as I see it, of this workshop organized by HHS and is really to have managed to bring everybody together and to discuss together what would be the next steps. So we really look forward to having a debrief from Daniel. For timing, he's keeping all these cards close to his chest. So I still don't know what you have written on your what was it? How do you on your quiz? He said it was quiz on your quiz, and I'm afraid that we can't ask you to reset because I don't know what you responded. So let's say that you all certainly passed, and so I don't know. I look forward really to see what will be the result of that. So as a terms of really next steps, now we'll have to discuss also with HHS and the other partners in this this project that HHS has been put together and deploying over the past years. What would be the best next steps? And I'm sure that you will all hear from us and see how we collectively manage to progress on this concept. So Daniel, or I'm sure it's you. And Daniel wants to keep the last word.
Absolutely.
A new surprise, Daniel.
So for me, this I'd hoped it turned out exactly as I hoped it would. It's an information gathering success. I think just tremendous amount of information over the last 3 days that we will use in our efforts to evaluate from a technical perspective the interest in our senior leadership in this area, and how far can we go, how far should we go in terms of U.S. support for this kind of endeavor. And I think we have some very positive things to work with that we'll try to put together certainly as a positive presentation to our senior management. We are BARDA is a technical organization essentially, and so we sort of anchor the technical wing, I think, of this of most of the conversation. We have a lot of experts in our group from industry, from other aspects of clinical manufacturing, flu background, and so we do have a pretty strong technical base, and we're going to try to move that forward with respect to this area. And my comments relate to what I see as sort of the important technical issues. And I think what I see from the overall look at what we've discussed is that there's kind of two levels that we're dealing with here. We're in terms of building a sustainable vaccine production capacity. One is where we are now, what we're working with our partners, WHO and PATH, and the funds that we have that we're using. And this is sort of to get to the first stage. This is to get to the point where there's an approvable vaccine. In other words, we make GMP pilot lots. We get to the point where we have a vaccine that we are pretty sure is going to meet the criteria as an approvable vaccine. And we've supported that, and I think we're getting ready to have some successes there with the programs and the partners that we have. And so the next big question is, how do we get from that stage, the approvable vaccine stage, to something that makes a difference, producing a large amount of vaccine that will be useful for the world and for the region or for the national interest, whatever we're doing there. And so, getting to that point involves a lot of technical issues, and we want to follow on with how we can move that forward, at least from our group. And I see sort of 4 areas that we will concentrate on as we leave this meeting. One is the old platforms. How do we use the old existing platforms that are there to get from the pilot stage to the production stage? Second is the new platforms, and we had a lot of discussion about the possibility of recombinant and transferring recombinant technology. I think there were more questions than there were answers with respect to the new platforms and how we could use that to produce enough vaccine to make a difference in the world. The third that we touched on was adjuvants, and we're very interested in that in the future, and how we can promote the use of adjuvants in the developing world where appropriate, to make more vaccine available with the existing manufacturing capacity that's there. And then the fourth is the idea of technology transfer, which we also talked about from existing industry. And that is a challenge, I think, you see. But the reality is, in my opinion, we're going to have to engage large pharma industry in this next step process to get to higher level productions. And so one of the things that we'll be looking at specifically is we will be looking at the technologies that are there with a separate meeting that will be put together by Dr. Jonathan Seals in our group, where we will bring in industry in, and they will be a very big part of that discussion and what we can do to move from this sort of phase 1 to phase 2. And then we want to look at what are the minimum requirements that we should be investing in based upon the discussions we've had here, that we would want to support either the regional approach or the national approach in the areas where there's a strong national presence. And so those are sort of some of the thoughts and the directions that we'll be following from our perspective. Daniel?
Before making a few remarks, I wanted to at the very outset of this last session to thank several people. One, certainly my co-chairs. This has been a very collaborative effort, and I've very much appreciated the energy and the commitment by Mike and Marie-Paule to making this a effective and productive workshop. I also want to thank the planning group. There was a small group of representatives, many of whom are in this room, who gave us excellent ideas and the raw material from which we could craft the general themes, organize the sessions, and to try to invite the spectrum of stakeholders that could speak to the areas of expertise and the topics that have been presented here. And I'd also like to specifically thank one of the members of my staff who is very, shall we say, shy about receiving public acknowledgement, and that would be Sarah Ramirez. We are all here. Those of you who traveled here are here due to her strong efforts to organize every logistical detail of this meeting, down to the power cords for you to plug in your laptops. Every single detail, she has worked with the MSA contractors and subcontractors to hopefully make this an enjoyable environment and efficient environment for you. So I want to thank her, even though she doesn't like to be acknowledged in public, and she's not in the room. And that's Sarah. So I just acknowledged the contributions of Sarah. Also to our partners in BARDA, Christina Hartman, and we have a host of people in both the BARDA group and in the International Influenza Unit who have contributed and assisted us in being able to pull this off. In terms of my final comments here will reflect as Marie-Paule and Mike have reflected on their perspectives are coming from where they sit. in terms of technical, in terms of multilateral, and et cetera. My comments are also going to come from where I sit in the bureaucracy. I represent the two entities. One is Centers for Disease Control. They pay my salary. And they also have had the foresight to place myself and others into the Office of the Secretary to provide the kind of bridging that needs to occur between the technical and operational with those who are the policymakers and decision makers, so that that kind of dialogue and discussion and exchange of information can be done on a daily, hourly, and minute-by-minute basis at times, particularly around about April of 2009. But the Office of Global Health Affairs is really concerned, is focused primarily on the intersection of science and policy and international relations. And from that perspective, we tend to be very process-oriented. We take the science as it is given to us by the experts. We attempt to understand it and try to understand the policy implications, and we serve as translators to those in policy making and decision making positions that are not necessarily experts and may not even be in the medical field. And so this workshop has really informed us tremendously in terms of the complexity and a full realization of the full spectrum of complexity of all the issues we have talked about in technology, in partnering, in costs, and et cetera. It also has clearly identified needs and gaps. This has been extremely productive from our perspective in hearing from you as the experts in your individual areas of expertise where there are needs and where there are gaps. We, in representing policymakers and fill in the blank, those with the purse strings, that doesn't guarantee that those needs will be addressed tomorrow, but at least we have a framework to think about in how to organize those needs and gaps in a way that we can explain it to those who do make the decisions. What comes first? What's foundation? Don't try to put the roof on a house that has no foundation. This has been extremely helpful to us to frame those kinds of briefings, presentations, and strategic thinking for the next several years with the policymakers. I am hopeful that as I'm not going to make you do another quiz, but I would ask you at some time in the next 24 hours if you would go back to the original objectives of this workshop and really reflect as to whether those objectives have been met. And as I said earlier, we would welcome any feedback on how we could have done it differently in order to better meet those objectives. But more importantly, in terms of those objectives are not just for today. Those objectives are really applicable for the future as well. We need to continue to identify the current status of where we are and where we need to get to. We need to forge new partnerships, and we need to identify the priorities and the stepwise approach of how to reach the ultimate goal of increasing access to influenza vaccine among all populations by way of increasing influenza vaccine production capacity in developing countries. Ultimately, I'm hopeful that one of the unspoken objectives for the workshop has been to stimulate thinking, discussion, and dialogue. And I'm hopeful that we have done that here, even though it wasn't a stated objective. And importantly, I think that in reflecting on today's presentation specifically, we not only need new partnerships, we need to strengthen the partnerships we have. And that represents the people in this room. And I'm hopeful that we've been able to bring together the wide spectrum of stakeholders and to provide an opportunity to not only to identify needs and gaps, but needs and gaps in terms of those partnerships and how to strengthen those partnerships. And most importantly, I think beyond the discussion of who do we need to engage in increasing vaccine manufacturing capacity in developing countries, we really need to also put as a high priority, and I'm hoping that this stakeholders workshop serves as a foundation to do that, is to forge a greater partnership and a stronger partnership in joint problem solving, because we all have our own pieces of the challenges and the issues here. But I think that this is an opportunity to see a model and identify methods by which we can move forward in the next 2 years. And I think that an important milestone is that we have follow-up meetings in joint problem solving and joint planning. Just as we have talked in other arenas of stovepiping of malaria and TB and influenza, we also tend to stovepipe basic science from applied research, from policy, from financing. And if we cannot break down those stovepipes, even in one topical area, then we have no hope of breaking down those stovepipes between disease entities. So I'm hopeful that one of the outcomes of this stakeholders workshop is a consensus that we should strengthen our partnership from here in our joint problem solving in the short, medium, and long term, and commit to further dialogue and engagement on the ultimate objectives. Thank you. You're all free to go.
Really quickly, we just wanted to, on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services, thank the co-chairs for their commitment and to recognize their leadership. And so we just have a small token of appreciation.
They know us well. Chocolate. Thank you.